the practice of knowing the type of thing I wanted and then just being really determined to go and set myself up to succeed in that type of job was probably what made the difference for me.
Hey, welcome to the show. I'm your host, Andrew Kaplan. And in this show, I chat with some of my SaaS heroes to hear their stories and hear how they've navigated the toughest moments in their careers. Today, I have Kevan Lee on the show. Kevan is the former VP of Marketing at Buffer and Oyster. And 5 months ago, he left his full-time gig to build his own company called Bonfire. Before we jump into the conversation with Kevan, I wanted to take a moment to say thank you for all the listeners and supporters of the show. The guests regularly share how many DMs and emails and messages they get after coming on and sharing their stories and being vulnerable. And that's really what inspires me to keep creating the show and allows them to come on here and to share the speed bumps in their journeys and not feel too vulnerable or embarrassed to come on here and to really normalize that everybody makes mistakes and encounters adversity on the way. So if you haven't already, please leave a review on Apple or Spotify or subscribe on YouTube to help service the show to other folks like you. Now let's go ahead and jump right into the conversation with Kevan. So I'm excited to chat. One, because it's been a few years since you and I have gotten to chat. Two, because I'm a fan. And three, because you just went on your own like 5 months ago, starting your own gig at Bonfire, which I want to learn more about. But from my understanding from the outside looking in, mix of coaching, advising, workshops, things like that. So first, congrats on taking the leap. And what I wanted to ask was, how are you feeling? And how did you get the courage to make the leap? Because I feel like there's a lot of folks out there who want to do and have the courage to do what you have recently done. How are you feeling? And how did you know it was time?
I'm feeling great. We've had a really good first few months together. It's me and my co-founder. Our name is Shannon. We work together at Oyster, which is a global employment company. I was head of marketing. She was head of brand. And we just loved doing the work together and thought, let's go do this on our own together. And honestly, that was probably how I overcame a lot of the fear with it, is having someone else to partner with to go and do the thing. Like I thought about going out on my own before, and Shannon and I had talked very openly about what needs to be true for us to go and do this. And for me, it was the fear and the risk. And like, I needed the courage to go and do it. I needed someone else to go through that journey with me. And so I didn't feel alone with it. Otherwise, I'd probably still be, looking for in-house roles, and I would not have taken the plunge when I did. And so having someone beside you doing that has been huge for me. And then just seeing the response from our networks when we went live, and thinking of imposter syndrome, like I guess I would imagine that you launch a thing, maybe it's crickets, and then you're just scrambling and hustling to try to find like any little bit of work from there. But in reality, like, I mean, you and I know tech is a small world, B2B SaaS is a small world. Like we all know each other and our work stands for itself, and we built some really strong connections. So people are like, they are there for you when you're sharing your next thing, whether it's a new job or if it's going on your own. And that has absolutely been the case for us. We've had a lot of inbound opportunities that haven't made it feel stressful.
I found the same thing when I went on my own. I was so nervous to do it, even scareder to share it publicly, because then it's real, right? If you share a launch publicly and then you just stop doing it, there's like a thing to be embarrassed about. And so there's all this pressure. And what I found is that all these people came out of these former chapters of my life, and they all were rooting for me and cheering for me and wanted to know how they could help. Sometimes it would be intros. Other times it would just be an attaboy, or sometimes somebody just saying, hey, I'm rooting for you. Like, I hope this all works out. And so that's cool that for folks who are listening, who are thinking, how will it feel? What will it be like? Am I too scared to do it? I mean, sample size of 2 here, but I found the same thing when I went on my own, that there was a lot more support and community than I would have guessed.
Yeah. And we do some coaching with folks who are thinking of making that leap. And a lot of it is about, how do I position myself? How do I get my first clients? Like those are a lot of the questions that we face. And I think to the point of like, I feel very lucky to have a co-founder getting to do this with. Like there's others who are doing it solo. I think it's more about just finding your circle, your community, your people who are there to support you. And that might be other peers who have gone solo and are doing their own thing. It might be people working on the business with you. It might be a collective or a network that you're running it with. But just having those people close to that you can share with, I think makes a really big difference.
And do you come from a family of entrepreneurs? Like, can you tell us a little bit more about your background and kind of your childhood? I'm curious how that kind of comes into play with your story here.
Yeah, of course. I do come from a family of entrepreneurs, and I never identified as an entrepreneur. And I always thought I am the exception to the rule. Like my brother is the most entrepreneur of like any entrepreneurs that I know. Like he has 3 master's degrees in nonprofit management and business and all these things. He has started dozens of different businesses. He invented a shoe that grows along with a child's foot so that when you're in a place like around the world where you don't have access to shoes every year, but you're growing up, like you can have this shoe and it grows with you. Just the smartest, most interesting things. And he is not afraid of it. No, like he's felt like the opposite of me in so many ways when it comes to business. I'm like, just tell me where the corporate ladder is and I'll go climb it. Like I need the roadmap. I've changed from that path, but that was kind of how I thought it would be. And then my dad, he ran his own plumbing business. He inherited it from his dad. And yeah, he was a blue collar worker, ran his own business for years. And he was very explicit on him not wanting me and my brother to take it over for him. So we never learned the business. He had another succession plan apart from us, and he wanted us to go into different careers and professions. And so I had his example of grit and determination and hustle and all that. I've had my brother's example of not being afraid of trying things and being courageous with ideas. And then I never thought I would do anything with those examples and inspiration, but here we are.
So you talked about gritty and being courageous and not being afraid of no's, all things that are obviously helpful today. Were you always like that? Like if we met someone who you were friends with in high school, would they describe you that way, or are those newer muscles that you've built?
I think they hide under the surface for me. I think if you had talked to someone who knew me in high school, they'd identify me as like creative, maybe driven, but driven more to the point of like, whatever you got to do to get us straight A's. When I was in school, my mom told me that if I got straight A's, I could get a full ride into any college in America that I wanted. She wasn't like making a promise, like we will pay for you to go to college. She was like, literally, that's how the system works, which I don't think the system actually works that way, but it was inspiring for me. And I was like, cool, great. All I got to do is apply myself, get straight A's, and I'm golden. And so I think I had that achievement mindset in high school, but simmering under the surface of that was kind of the grit, the determination. Like I could set a goal and achieve it, and no matter what it would take to get there. But I think people maybe saw the end result of that and saw me as more like performative and achievement oriented.
I was a B- student myself. My parents said if I went to a state school, maybe they'd chip in for a car. And they did. My dad got a brand new car when I graduated high school, and he gave me his old clunker. And I put God knows how much money into that thing to keep it on the road. And so many different paths to different destinations. So how did you go from being in high school? You've got this family of entrepreneurs. You've got your dad who's a plumber, your brother who's into different entrepreneurial things. You're very academic and very driven. How did you go from that version of you and start to get into the tech world and into the marketing world?
It took a while. So I went to school for journalism. That was like my college degree, communication and journalism. And I thought I'd be like writing the back page of Sports Illustrated or living like the writer's life in New York or whatever the case may be. And this was not reality once I got into school and kind of realized how the machine worked. And then I was at school for journalism right around the time the newspaper industry was changing considerably. And so newspapers are going away, jobs are going away. And just kind of realized like, oh, I love the writing part. I love the storytelling part. I love the curiosity aspects of journalism, but I don't love the hours. I don't love the industry. I don't love a lot of what the job itself would entail. And so I did a couple of jobs out of school. I wrote for a couple of papers that now no longer exist, which is kind of a cool badge of honor. And then just kind of took some odd jobs. Like I worked at a veterinary hospital in Seattle, which is where I went to school. Moved back to Idaho, which is where I was born and raised and where I live now, and worked for a health food company and wrote here and there for them. And those jobs were fine. And I was just kind of coasting through life. And the stuff that was more exciting for me was the side hustles and the hobbies and projects. And so I started a website around a sports team that I loved and built a really big community around that. It ended up getting acquired by Vox. And so I joined the Vox family to that website.
Sorry to interrupt you. What was the team?
The Boise State Broncos. I mean, serendipitously, they were really good when I was writing about them. And so that probably helped get some exposure, which doesn't hurt. It was probably one of the dumbest things I've ever made. Like it was just the most silly, sarcastic, snarky website, but people responded to it and we built a cool little community around it. And that was kind of like my playground or my sandbox for learning a lot of the tech stuff was, oh, cool. Here's this hobby space that I love spending time in. In order to grow this thing, I got to learn about how content management systems work. Got to learn content marketing, got to learn headline writing and SEO and email marketing and social and all these different things. And so it was really just like a neat, I didn't realize it at the time, but like a neat entry point into that whole world of tech and digital marketing. So, you know, I was kind of my foot in the door and then got fully into it once I joined the team at Buffer and was off and running from there.
Oh, it's super cool. So you talk about sports a little bit. When I think about sports, I love hearing the welcome to the league moments, which is like normally a moment in an athlete's career, usually when they enter a new league, whether that's college or professional level, where they get humbled a little bit. So for me, my welcome to the league moment was when I worked at HubSpot. I was on this cool experimental team, and I had put the goals for my team on this whiteboard, like a little thermometer type graph with the goal at the top and our status on the bottom. And we were on pace to hit the goal, my little experimental team. So I was swagging. You know, this is when we were in the office and I was kind of walking around like, hey, look at me. Like everybody sees the goal and it's looking pretty good. And one day, one of the execs who was extremely stoic and extremely direct casually walked by, looked at me right in front of the whole floor. And he said, these are really unimpressive numbers. You should really learn to set much more aggressive goals. That was my welcome to the league moment. It was like, oh, okay, you could do a good job. And there's a lot more to this game than I realized. And so I'm curious to know, did you have a welcome to the league moment when you started getting into tech or an early challenge that kind of shaped your perception of things?
I think for me, it was even getting into tech was my humbling moment. Like I thought I could just apply to the thing I wanted and show up well in the interview process and I'd be golden. Like I can write, I have a degree, I have all these things in my background. And so when I wanted to start into tech, like from Vox, get into tech proper, I came across this really cool listing for a content writer at Buffer, which is where I ended up working. So it's a social media management app. And they were hiring a content writer, essentially like the first marketing hire on the team. And so it was just the most amazing job. It sounded like he got to work remotely because they were one of the first remote companies. We get to write for a living. I was like, cool, I got this. Like I got it figured out. And I applied and I wrote a good application letter and all that stuff and did not get even a sniff at the job. Like I was nowhere even close to getting there. And the co-founder sent such a nice rejection email, which I took to heart. It was just like, oh, we make mistakes all the time and we'd love to stay in touch with you. And sorry, it didn't work out this time. But like, oh, they would actually like to hear from me. Like I had no idea it was a form rejection at the time. I was just like, oh, this is amazing. But I took them up on their offer.
Was it the standard rejection?
It was. They were just very nice with their rejection templates. And so I don't know, maybe other people did the same, but I took it to heart and I responded to them and stayed in touch with them. I had to get like more networking and have more of my content out there. And so I started writing for other places. And then, yeah, lo and behold, the job came open again a few months later. And I applied for it then and had my foot in the door. And so I was able to slide in there. But even then, like I had no experience at all with social media. Like I did not have, like Twitter was big at the time. I was not even on Twitter. Like I had no idea what I was doing. I just had, I don't know what they saw in me. I had potential, or I had the white man privilege of thinking I can do whatever thing I'm applying for. I don't know what it was, but I was in the door and making it work. The first article I wrote for them was this like listicle about email marketing, which they were so nice to say like, this is great. And in hindsight, I'm like, why would they let me publish an email marketing listicle on this social media website? Like it made no sense. And so I think I landed in a really good spot where they were gracious about me. But at the same time, like it was a humbling experience to know like, oh no, there's not just any role out there that I can have. You have to actually show that you can hack it in this business, in this world. And fortunately, they saw something in me that made them think I could.
What made you bet on yourself again and knock on that door again? Because I think that there's a lot of folks, probably myself included, if we apply for a job and we don't get it, this isn't the right analogy, but it almost feels like, you know, maybe trying to date an ex again from your past or something. I'm curious to know why it didn't stop you and that you gave it another shot. And obviously it worked out for the best, but I'm curious to know the mindset behind that and why you didn't just say, oh, shoot, I already got a rejection letter. Like, I can't apply for that one again. They've already rejected me once. I can't get rejected twice type of thing. Yeah.
Well, I think some of it might be blissful ignorance and naivety. Like I had no idea if this was something people did or didn't do. And so that helped a little bit. I think the bigger reason though is I knew that I wanted a job like Buffer. Like I wanted to work remotely. I wanted to do the types of things I thought I was really good at, which was writing and problem solving and working on things that scale. And for me, it was less about, it didn't actually happen for me until I took the idea of Buffer almost out of my head. Like it wasn't about me needing to join Buffer. It was about me needing to pursue this path in my life. And if I pursue it thinking Buffer is the thing, then maybe it's not actually Buffer, but it's something like Buffer. I'm at least in the ballpark of what I want it to be. And I think that was just a really helpful, almost like goal setting or mind hack in a way of like, oh, well, these are the things I know need to be true for me to get a job like this. And if it's a Buffer, great. But if it's not a Buffer, it could be any of these other spots. And I think, luck and timing and all these other things play a big role in whether those jobs actually work out. But the practice of knowing the type of thing I wanted and then just being really determined to go and set myself up to succeed in that type of job was probably what made the difference for me.
And you had a great run. I mean, I'm looking at your LinkedIn. So you're at Buffer almost 7 years. Work your way up from where we're talking about to eventually becoming VP of marketing. I know you've had a couple of other VP of marketing stints since then. These aren't easy jobs. So I'm curious to know if there's been other low points on this journey for you, kind of after this moment where you get in the door and you continue on. What's another one of those building block moments, one of those speed bumps that you encountered?
Yeah, so many of them. I can think of one time I was in charge of a brand refresh for Buffer. And I was so excited about it because like brand marketing is one of my favorite things to do, but I had never done it before and I had no idea what I was doing, which is true for most things in that role. But I went and found the most amazing agency that I'd always dreamed of working with. And they're called Fuzzco. They've done branding for MailChimp and all these really cool brands, amazing folks. I got to work with them. I got a lot of leeway on the project to go and lead it and come back with ideas and share with the CEO. And we spent a lot of money on it too, of course. And so here I am close to the end of the project. I think I had landed in a pretty good spot with it.
How far along into your Buffer career is this? Like, had you already had a bunch of wins? Are you like in a leadership position? I just want to contextualize.
Yeah, it's a ways into it, maybe 4 years into it. And so I'm the head of marketing, director of VP level. I report to the CEO. I'm part of the leadership team. And so kind of the buck stops with me on the marketing side until I get the CEO's opinion on things, which is what happened in this example. And so I'm sharing it with the leadership team and the CEO, and it's just not resonating. And we are like at the end of our engagement with this agency where we've gone through all the revisions that we've had, and lo and behold, like it is not meeting the mark for our CEO. And so I had to like pull the plug on everything. Like all of that work went to waste. We didn't ship a single thing from that project. We learned a lot. Like we learned what we didn't like. I learned how to run a project. I learned how to loop in stakeholders earlier and make it approval. But overall, it was just like a total waste of time, money, resources for really nothing to show for it.
And was this a big bet for you? Like for you being the head of marketing, was this like a massive bet for you to be like, hey, we're going to take a brand that has scaled up until this point and totally change things? Did you feel a lot of pressure personally?
I did. Yeah. I don't remember it as acute pressure more so than other stuff I was working on. But I think what felt unique about it is that I knew that quality and craft and these things were like really mattered to the company. And if I could not show that I was capable of meeting the bar with these things, then like where does that leave me here moving forward? And so I had a lot of repair to do with that. Like I had to go back and get more quick wins and small things and kind of build up that trust again, because that was a really big component of what leadership at Buffer looked like, was attention to detail and care and high bar and all these different things. And I don't even know how much of a setback it was, but I think it was a moment for me to reflect and be like, I have a lot of work to do to get back to where I was with the relationship with my boss, for example.
Can we go back to the moment? Because I'm curious now, because I've been in meetings where things don't go well, they pull the plug on it, and I can remember viscerally. And so I'm wondering, is there a specific meeting? Is there like a D-Day type event for you? Is it just like a series of emails where like slowly the opinions are coming out and then all of a sudden you have this big meeting? Like what actually unfolds where you hear the CEO's opinion and feel the gravity of, hey, we have to pull the plug on this and not ship what we've been working on?
This one's a bit foggy on like the specifics. And also this happened twice to me. And so I might be like conflating it with the other time that it happened. The other time it happened was maybe a year or two later, and we were going to create a conference from scratch, like our own conference, digital conference event. And it was a really big deal, and had a couple of people on my team working a lot on it. And it was maybe like a week. Oh no, it was the night before we were going to send the emails and get everything officially out into the world. And that one happened across Slack. That was like, oh, doesn't feel good to move forward with this. Like, let's pump the brakes and revisit this. I think when I hear that, and same thing with the brand project, I think it was a similar, like it wasn't like in a big group setting. It wasn't like super public. It was either in a one-to-one or it was in an email chain. It was something more intimate like that. Remember those moments viscerally, the feeling of, oh no, something is off. In order to get this back on track, I can hardly even fathom all that needs to happen to like get this where it needs to get. I guess honestly, like I just give up in the sense of like, oh, we'll just scrap it and we'll move on to the next thing. And I think I was maybe that's one thing I was proud of, is being able to like not fall into the sunk cost fallacy and stuff like that. Like I was able to cut ties and move on. And it hurt in the moment, especially hurt when there were other people on the team who had invested time in it too. Like I don't care as much about my time and effort and energy as much as I do to people on my team who were looking forward to something or eager about something. So that was the hardest part, I think, was then me having to go and manage my people whom it impacted.
Right. And when you're in a leadership position, I went through this myself for what it's worth at Wistia. And when you're that leader of the team, and all of a sudden the team is demotivated and you're the person relaying the information from the executive layer, then all of a sudden you're or at least I was a little self-conscious around, well, how is the team perceiving me now? Do they still view me as a leader because I sort of led them in the wrong direction? Did you feel any of that? I'm sort of projecting my feelings here, but that's how I felt. Does any of that resonate with you?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And it's such a hard conversation to have too, because you're trying to protect the leadership layer too, or translate what they're saying in a way that is well received, maybe softening some of the things leadership told you, or contextualizing what leadership might be thinking, because your people might not have the context leadership has. It's a whole process to figure out how to manage through that. And I think there is a bit of trust building again with the team, like you mentioned. Like I think I worried a bit about how much faith they had in me to execute on their ideas and their decisions. I think in general, I managed from a place of like being very open with folks, like bring your ideas, we'll find ways to make them happen. That was hard for me to think like, oh, maybe they will not bring as many ideas moving forward because they don't think that I can be the one to help bring these ideas to life. And then also like, I don't want to be the one making them think like leadership is a blocker either, or to have these feelings about work in general within this culture or this place that they can't get stuff done. And so I feel like a lot of cultural burden to manage through those situations as well.
This episode of the show is brought to you by AppQues. If you work in product-led growth, you know how important activating and engaging new accounts is. Helping those new accounts get set up, experiencing the value quickly, and then continuing to engage them deeper is super important to your success in a product-led environment. My team spent years focused on this when I was leading growth teams in-house, and I know how hard it can be. And it's why I'm so excited that AppQues is sponsoring the show. They're the leading product onboarding and adoption platform for web and mobile apps. And they created the Product Adoption Academy, which is where you can go get a free masterclass, think courses, templates, examples, etc., to help you level up your product chops. And if you haven't already, check out my Value First onboarding course in the Academy, where I share the exact framework my teams created that helped us onboard and activate hundreds of thousands of new users during my time at Wistia. Check out the Academy at appcues.com/product-adoption-academy, or my personal Value First onboarding course at appcues.com/value. This episode is brought to you by Novatic. We're seeing the next phase of product-led growth emerge right now. The first phase of PLG was all about using your product as a go-to-market tool. Basically creating free plans, free trials, or reverse free trials, getting new accounts to sign up, and then layering in retention and upgrade programs. It was a solid playbook. The only challenge is that the product value is hidden behind your sign-up form, which means that most of your visitors never get to see it. The next phase of PLG is all about leading with product value, creating interactive product demos, embedding them on your website, and letting people play with them, click around, and see the value before signing up. This engages way more people, which means more experience that value, more convert to your paid plans, and more become brand advocates. If you're sold on the idea, but not sure where to start? Check out Novatic. Their no-code editor makes it easy to create interactive demos, and they're offering a free trial exclusively for Delivering Value listeners. Go to novatic.com/value and sign up for a free trial and see for yourself. Curious to know maybe two things. One, for folks who are listening to this that are like, man, I'm in a new leadership role. How do I avoid this happen? Is there a takeaway here? And then the second part of the question is, for folks who have been through a situation like this, what's your advice to help them move past it so that it doesn't become a weight that they feel like they need to carry with them from position to position, job to job, or something that kind of weighs them down?
Yeah, because I think there is no avoiding it. I think it will happen to you.
Yeah, I kind of agree. Right.
So maybe step one is avoid leadership if you can, like stay on the IC route or something. I don't know. That's probably bad advice. My takeaway from it was over communicate with the things that are really important for you and your team, and the things that you feel might draw particular care or attention from the people above you. Like I can think of projects that in various jobs, my boss, which is typically the CEO, would care a lot about, and projects where they would care very little about. And I think if you're in a leadership role, you probably have that sense as well. Like there's going to be things that certain CEOs care a lot about and things that are fine. Like they will just pass them off. And so those things that you know they will care about, like involve them early, get their thoughts, share versions of it. We often do this thing on my old teams of I share 30% done and 90% done. And those like check-ins during the process, at least at those intervals, tend to be really helpful. And so I carried that forward to future experiences. If you've been through it and are kind of on the other side of it and wondering like how to move forward from it and things like that, like I do think it was helpful for me to compartmentalize it a little bit into here is the total scope of everything that I'm doing for this business. This is one isolated thing that was important to me at the time, but it is not like integral into everything else. Like it's not like the keystone thing that if you take it away, everything else is going to fall apart. So if you have built a plan, I imagine that plan has plenty of contingencies and plenty of plan Bs. And like you have built a machine such that if you pull this one thing out, the whole thing is not going to come crumbling down. I think that was reassuring to me moving forward. It's like, oh yeah, this thing didn't work, but all these other things are working, or I have plans for all these other things. And then just to think of the overall, to use a sports metaphor, like the batting average that you might have, like you're not going to get everything through 100% of the time. And even that contextualization is helpful for me. Like I think as I'm wired to want to have 100% success rates on everything that I do, if anytime I don't, it's hard, but it's also unrealistic to ask for that. And so just that constant reminder and that grace, I think is helpful to get me over the block.
It's great feedback, all of it, right? So have combos with your CEO. If your CEO is your boss or your boss is somebody else, have conversations with them. If you don't know what's important to them, then communicate early and often on those things and maybe less so on the other things. And then to help you move past it, remember the value that you bring is greater than the sum of just one of the parts, or is the combination of all the different things that you bring and not just this one particular project. Don't give it too much weight is kind of what I heard you say.
Yeah, absolutely. And to that first point, I think some of the things that I specifically then started asking my boss at the start of the project, how often do you want to hear from me about this? Like, how often do you want updates on this? Because I don't want to overwhelm you with context, but I want you to stay informed. And then throughout the project, checking in to ask, are you hearing from me often enough on this? Or do you feel like you've had a chance to give enough feedback on this particular thing? And I think just having those moments in that specific language has been helpful for checking in there. And then the second point, the bigger picture stuff, like keeping like a little wins folder of the stuff that's going well for your team, or reflecting back on the overall strategy every now and then and making sure like you can see the complete picture. I think that perspective is really helpful in moments like that.
Great advice. Something I do as well. I call it a trophy file. And I started doing it around this point in my career that we're talking about for basically the same reasons. So great advice. Obviously tough feedback to hear when you're working on something, you got to pull the plug on it. Have there been other tough, either in a formal review setting or more informal settings, or frustrating feedback that you've received that stands out to you? Because it's something that I hear a lot about as a coach. Is usually something like, hey, I just had this review or I just got this feedback and I'm a little blown back by it. And I'm curious to know if you ever had moments like that, and if so, what they were.
I think sometimes those moments have happened to me, like when I've been surprised by feedback, and I'm also wired to try to get ahead of all the feedback that someone could ever give me so that I'm never surprised by it, which is also kind of an exhausting way to live. But it is something I'm working on. But I think the hardest stuff for me to hear is feedback that goes against an intentional way that I try to show up in leadership or with my teams or with my people. And so the specific example for me is that I do not speak up often in meetings unless I think it's important. I do not pound the table for things unless I think they're important. Like, it's very rare. Like, I am oftentimes a quiet voice in the room, and that's like an intentional space. I think I like to create space for others to talk. I like to work asynchronously on things rather than hash out ideas live in the moment. And so just like by nature, I'm choosing a different path there, but I often have received feedback that that's like, people want to hear from me more. They want me to be more demonstrative in this way or that way. I remember one time in particular when I was interviewing for a job at Postscript, and like when you and I met, it was the last interview round, I think it was, or toward the end of it. And I was meeting with like the senior leaders on the team, and I thought it was going great. Of course, maybe I was delusional about it, but we got to a part of the conversation where it became really important that they felt like I could be someone who would pound the table for a particular thing that I wanted to have happen. And they asked for examples. I tried my best to share a couple examples from it, but also like, I think maybe they were asking for something that I wasn't able to provide and wasn't interested in providing, asking me to be someone that I wasn't comfortable being. And fortunately, like, it didn't end up working out for me to join Postscript, of course. And then so I think like that might not have been a fit anyway. But I think that aspect of feedback of, oh, like, we're looking for someone who's stand up for what they want in this room and to be really argumentative about these particular things. And we want to be challenged on these things. Like, knowing that's not me, but hearing that feedback is really hard. It's like, well, what do I do with that if I want this thing, but this is how people want me to be in this situation? It feels like it kind of goes against your identity in a way.
So I didn't know that happened. Obviously, I worked at Postscript at that time. But you know what's really interesting? I got that feedback too, about a year and a half in, that I wasn't pounding the table enough, that I wasn't being demonstrative. I mean, that's your words, but very similar adjectives they used. And I was caught off guard by that because I'm not a shy person, but that's not my style. And I don't like to have to be in a place that feels combative to move forward with things I feel conviction on. I typically make my case in other ways. So it's interesting, right? So we both got very similar feedback, although our styles are maybe a little bit different, but probably also very similar in a lot of ways. Was that in the meeting? Like in the interview, they told you that, or was it like in an email later? Did you have to process the feedback in real time while trying to smile and still be charismatic?
I did. Yeah. It happened in the interview. Yeah. And so like, it was maybe 30 minutes in, and I thought I had answered everything pretty well. I thought it was going well. And then I felt the room turn at that moment. I was like, oh no, I am in like scramble mode to save this thing. Is kind of how it felt once the line of questioning turned that way. And then afterward, I was like, yeah, I don't think this is going to happen for us. Like at the end after we hung up. So yeah, it was tough to process of like, okay, I got to think through examples of when I have showed up in this way, but also explain why this is maybe not the way I would choose to show up, and maybe not what you would expect to see from me if I were to join the team. And so it was a really tricky balance of, trying to find the nuance within that conversation.
So what's going through your head in that moment? Because you're in the interview, you're there because you're hoping to get the job at that stage of the interview process. You get this feedback, you're trying to process it. Maybe you're coming to the conclusion that culturally it might not be the right fit on both sides. What's going through your head, and how do you manage to smile through the rest of the interview?
I think selfishly, like, I wanted to end that interview with them wanting to hire me, even though I knew at that moment, like, I don't know that I could work here or that I would be happy here and things like that. It's like intellectually, I knew something was amiss to the degree that it's not a slam dunk if things were to keep progressing, but I still wanted to end the interview with them liking me, wanting to hire me. And so it was just such an interesting tension. I remember in the moment, even I was like, is it worth it for me to keep trying to save this? Or should I just call it what it is and be like, if this is what you're looking for, I don't think I'm the person for it. And maybe they could read that on my face. I don't know. I was probably processing it like live through my eyes or something like that. But trying to adapt in the moment to it was also a really good challenge, I guess, that I learned from and carried forward. Like when we're in the room with leaders and other folks, we will be caught guard with questions and expectations. So thinking on the fly and reacting on the fly is a really good skill to have. And that was one of the more pressure packed rooms I could have been in. Like here I am really wanting this job, wanting to impress folks, and then having this kind of come out of the blue for me. So I think I learned how to manage through that. But at the time it was kind of like a struggle mentally of even like, is it worth it to keep pushing? Or is it just better to call it what it is and move on?
Is there a way to surface that kind of stuff? And when I say that kind of stuff, more specifically, I'm thinking about understanding maybe the cultural, like the real culture of the company. Communication culture is maybe how I might describe it earlier. You're probably 3 rounds into the interview process at that point, right? You've invested a lot of time, a lot of emotional energy, physical time. You probably worked on 2 projects, I bet, to make it to that point, if I remember right. Is there a way to shortcut that for folks listening?
Probably. I would like to think there is. But I think the tricky thing is it's not all up to you either. I think it's a two-way street. Like how much is the company willing to reveal about themselves up until that point versus how good are you at asking the right questions or talking to the right people or doing the right research into it. I think there's kind of this dance that happens when you're in those interview processes where you're wanting people to keep saying yes to you and you as a candidate are wanting them to keep saying yes from their side, such that maybe some of the trickier, harder stuff just is kind of being compressed and put behind the door so that you don't see it. I think some of the good questions that I have asked since have been, having moments where I'm asking, can I talk to someone else on the team? Like taking more control of the interview process for me and be like, oh, great, I didn't get to meet this person, or I'd love to spend more time with this person. And then making that more of a dedicated time for me to interview them rather than all the questions to be about me. So I've done that a few times. I have used some examples from the case study rounds of what it's like to be in a room with multiple people from the company where they're asking questions and digging into things. I might push back a little bit and see how that feels. I might try to take the conversation away from me presenting into more of me asking questions the way that I do in meetings and almost using it as like its own little sandbox for how might things be. Sometimes I have asked for like recordings of a C-level meeting that I might be part of in the future.
That's a really good idea.
They don't always say yes, but it's a cool little inside peek into how things might actually be when you get there. So there's a few tactics to try, but at the end of the day, that you still might not fully know what it's going to be like.
As a side note, I also call it dancing in the moment. It's like when you're kind of caught on your heels, I literally would call it dancing in the moment. So it's funny that you use a similar way to describe it. And as a side note, are those case studies when you have to get up in front of the room and defend your dissertation in front of a whole bunch of leaders who weren't even in the interview? Is that the worst type of interview in the whole world for a candidate? My God.
It's so bad. And then from the other side is like, I've been on the other side interviewing people. It will sound awful to admit, but like they have sent over these beautiful slide decks or presentations for us to review in advance. And most of us are reading them like 5 minutes before the meeting starts and coming in so unprepared for any of it. And it's like, it is not a very equitable. Or during the meeting, yeah. Tell me about yourself while I finish reading your case study. And so, no, it is bad. It's bad. Speaking of imposter syndrome, I was doing a case study for Oyster, which is the company that I spent a couple of years at after Buffer. And it was the most imposter syndrome I've ever felt was in filling out that case study. The prompt was something that you might expect in like an MBA classroom. It was just like full of words I did not understand and asking me to do things I had no idea how to do. And again, it's like testing you on this theoretical knowledge of stuff that you have very little context on. In theory, it's designed to see how you think and might approach problems, but to the candidate, it feels like the worst homework assignment you could ever get, and that you have no idea how the grading is going to happen. And so like muddling my way to that was such an interesting psychological trip for me, because I was like, oh, well, I'll do my best on this and I'll do what I think I know. At the end of it, rather than feel like I was an imposter and got all the wrong answers, I convinced myself that no, what I've done here is actually give all the answers that I know to the best of my ability. And if that's not enough, then I'm not going to be very successful in this role regardless. And so that was almost freeing in a way of like, well, I'm just going to tell them everything I know about this. And if it's not enough, then I probably saved myself a very difficult next few years on a job I cannot do. And so it was kind of a nice moment of reflection of like, no, I've done my best. It has to be enough.
I was working with a coach at you reminded me of this story. I was working with a coach at one point and I said, I feel like I just don't know the right calls. And she said, who knows all the right calls? And I said, well, and I mentioned a person's name who I looked up to. And I said, it seems like this person always seems to know the right thing to do. And she was like, dude, you're out of your mind. Nobody knows the answers. Nobody has all the answers. Your job isn't to have the right answer. Your job is just to make the best decision with the info that you have. And if you get more information later, you can update your decision. If you don't have enough information to make a decision, maybe you try to grab a little bit more. But that's the job. And that's what your story reminds me of, that lesson for me, which is like, there's no good for an assignment like that. Maybe if you went to McKinsey or Bain for 10 years, maybe you know the cheat code to how to answer those questions because it's normally that background. But for the rest of us, we're just trying to do the best that we can in that moment and keep it moving, because there's always a little bit more that you could take it. And at some point, it has to be good enough.
Yeah, absolutely. People might think that I have it together, and I clearly do not, and I don't have all the answers. And like, those stories are so rarely heard and told. Like, you're not popping on LinkedIn every day and seeing people talk about how they Googled what is SEO the other day or stuff like that. Like, it is all highlights and wins, and that's not always the case by far. Like, most days are not about that at all. And so it's nice to have a balance of that, or we need more of a balance of that, I think.
Yeah, I agree. And that's what I'm excited to do with the show. And I appreciate you kind of sharing some of these. Do you feel like you're a marketing expert at this point? Because I look at you from the outside looking in. I've never shared this with you personally, but I look at you and I'm like, oh, that's an expert. Like, that's a pro. That's somebody who I think any company would be crazy not to have. Does it feel that way on the inside?
I mean, it feels great. It feels like I need to snippet this and put it in my love folder, or my, like, put it on my trophy case. Like, I think it's really nice to have that validation and feedback from peers, and honestly, someone I really admire too. Like, I think that makes it all the more impactful. I think I've convinced myself by now that I'm pretty good at a lot of marketing things, but very specific to the types of jobs that I've had before. And so I've yet to fully embrace like I'm good at marketing writ large. It's more like, oh, I've been good at marketing at Buffer and at Oyster and at a few other places. And maybe by the time I reach a certain threshold of places I've been good at, it'll feel like I'm good overall. And so like, yeah, it hasn't quite sunk in all the way yet, which is also kind of difficult when you're running your own business and people are coming to you asking for your advice on things. Like, how can I consult a company when I don't personally think that I'm good enough at marketing? And so it's kind of like a constant daily struggle of like, let me fake it again in this call, or wing it on this project and things, when really, like, I think the truth again is like, yeah, I'm actually better at this than I give myself credit for, is probably where reality is.
And smart enough to figure it out, right? It's like, who knows? Like, any company that wants to work with someone like you, or even someone like me when I do some advising as well, I have to remind myself that they're here because they need help. And I just need to help them. I don't have to be right. I just need to help them take the next step and to do a little bit more. And if I can be right, sometimes that's great, but nobody can be right all the time. And so that resonates deeply with me personally. I'm curious to know, at this stage of your career, because you've been in-house, you've worked your way up the marketing ladder, you've worked at some pretty cool, recognizable companies that other folks in the tech space know about, and now you're on your own supporting other folks. What are the career goals that you have for this stage, in this chapter of your career in your life?
If you'd asked me this a few years ago, I would have told you like a very probably standard climb the ladder type of answer. Like, I want to go from this role to this role to this promotion to that promotion. And I found like that was just such a tiring treadmill to be on. And it was not the way that I wanted to live my life. And so I've convinced myself that, oh, if my career ended tomorrow, I would feel amazing at the stuff that I've accomplished. Like, sometimes on interviews, I remember people would ask, like, what is your mountain that you've climbed so far? And it just felt like once you climb a mountain, they're just going to ask you what the next mountain is, or what's the bigger mountain. There's always like the next mountain. But I feel really good about what I've accomplished so far. And so it's much less about having certain revenue goals or hitting a certain number of clients or all these kind of like measurable things in that way. And I think success or goal setting for me becomes much more about how can I spend more of my time doing the things that bring me more and more joy. And so it's much more about life design. It's about giving back. It's about understanding myself and the things that make me happy and the people who are important to me happy. And then creating that work that enables me to do more of that feels like success, much more so than being a CMO or having a certain salary or working for this type of company that's going to go public. I think I've successfully switched gears into this other mentality, and it's been really, really lovely and reassuring and peaceful, more so than the other one was for me.
Sounds like success is more of an energy for you than an outcome.
I love that. Yeah. Very well said.
Thank you for coming on and sharing your speed bumps. I know it's not easy, but I just wanted to say how much I personally appreciate it, and I'm sure the listeners will as well. For folks who are listening that are curious to learn more about you, and maybe some of your thoughts on marketing and tech and maybe work with you, how can they get a hold of you? Where should they follow you? How can they connect?
Yeah, so I run a weekly newsletter on Substack. It's kevanlee.substack.com. My website is kevanlee.com. It has links to social and all that good stuff. And if you want to learn more about the business that I'm running now, it's called Bonfire, and you can find Bonfire at aroundthebonfire.com. We're on social media. We have our own Substack too.
Thank you. I appreciate you coming on and appreciate the time.
Thanks, Andrew. This has been great.
Thank you for listening to the pod. I hope that you enjoyed the episode. If you did, the biggest gift that you could give me as a small business owner and as a content creator would be a review. You know the game. You can go on to Apple Podcasts. You can go on Spotify. Leave a review. That would help me service this content to other folks who are like you. Obviously, you should subscribe to the content if you really dug it. And if there's feedback that you have for me, folks you think I should chat with, stuff that you wish I would gloss over faster, whatever it is, I'm all ears. I work in growth. You're not going to hurt my feelings. I try to collect feedback and iterate quickly. You can reach out to me on LinkedIn at Andrew Kaplan or on Twitter at @akaplan. Otherwise, hope you enjoyed the episode, and I'll see you next show.